The city glittered beneath her like a sea of stars trapped in glass. Cars rushed through the streets, their headlights weaving glowing trails, while skyscrapers rose like giants wrapped in neon light. From where she stood high on the ledge, it looked alive, beautiful, untouchable. But to her it meant nothing. She was only a shadow against the skyline, unseen, unwanted, and ready to disappear. Her fingers clutched the cold railing until her knuckles turned white. Her body trembled, not from the wind but from the weight she had carried too long. Her eyes, swollen from endless nights of tears, stared into the void. The bruises on her soul hurt more than any wound on her skin. Years of betrayal, rejection, and loneliness pressed down on her shoulders, leaving her hollow. She had fought for so long, but the fight had drained every last piece of strength she had left. The night wind howled around her, biting at her skin like icy claws. Her hair whipped across her face, stinging her cheeks. Beneath her, the city roared, horns blaring, engines growling, voices echoing up from the streets. It was a world still moving, still living, but she no longer belonged to it. The dizzying drop below seemed to whisper, calling her closer, promising peace. She tightened her grip, her body swaying as though the abyss itself was pulling her forward. Memories struck her in flashes, sharp and cruel. The man she once loved, smiling sweetly before tearing her heart apart. The family who turned away, closing their doors when she was most desperate. The sting of laughter, the shame of poverty, the humiliation of always being less. Each image cut deeper, a cruel reminder that she was never enough. Her thoughts whispered like poison. No one sees you. No one cares if you're gone. The world will go on without you. She believed it. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life, invisible to a world too cruel to notice. If she vanished tonight, nothing would change. No one would miss her. The loneliness was unbearable, heavy as chains around her heart. Tears blurred her vision as she leaned forward. Her lips parted, releasing a soft, broken farewell that disappeared into the wind. This was it, the end. The moment her pain would finally stop. Her body tilted, ready to let go. And then it came. A voice, loud, firm, and cutting through the night like lightning. Don't do it, her breath caught. Her body froze. For the first time in hours, in days, maybe in years, she wasn't alone. The streets were almost empty at that hour, filled only with the hum of passing cars and the echo of footsteps. He didn't belong there, not really. Men like him usually traveled in black cars with tinted glass, surrounded by assistants and guards. Men like him didn't walk alone through the midnight air. Yet tonight, the billionaire wandered the streets like a restless ghost. His suit was tailored, his shoes polished, but his eyes were tired. He was a man the world admired, feared even, powerful, ruthless, untouchable. But the weight of that image suffocated him. Behind the walls of glass offices and luxury mansions, he was as empty as the night itself. Wealth had given him everything people dreamed of, except peace. Tonight he was running, though even he wasn't sure from what. Maybe from the silence of his house. Maybe from the guilt that refused to sleep. As he walked, his gaze drifted upward toward the skyline. Something caught him, a stillness on the edge of the towering bridge. It wasn't natural. Among the flashing lights and restless city, one figure stood motionless. A faint silhouette. His chest tightened. A sharp instinct struck him. He knew. Even before his mind processed it, his body already felt it. Someone was about to step into the void. His steps quickened, his breath shallow. And then he saw her. She was small against the vast city lights, her form trembling, the night wind pulling at her hair. From where he stood, she looked like a broken shadow barely clinging to existence. And in that moment, fear jolted through him. Real fear, the kind he hadn't felt in years. If she moved just 1 inch forward, she would be gone. The words tore out of him before he even thought. "Don't do it!" His voice thundered in the night, echoing unnaturally loud against steel and concrete. The sound carried urgency, raw and unplanned. It shattered the silence like glass, cutting through the invisible wall she had built around herself. Her head snapped around. Her eyes burned as they locked on him, fury blazing through the tears. "Why do you care?" She spat, her voice sharp and trembling. "You don't know me. Just leave me alone." Her anger was fire, fierce and wounded. To her, he was just another stranger, another intruder pretending to care. She had heard enough empty words in her life. Why should this be any different? He stood frozen for a heartbeat, but then his eyes met hers fully, And in that instant, the mask he wore for the world cracked. He saw her pain. It wasn't just despair. It was years of rejection. Loneliness carved deep into her face, the same weight he carried but never admitted. Something in him shifted. "You don't understand," she said bitterly. "No one can save me. Not you, not anyone." Her laugh was short and sharp, almost mocking, but beneath it was a cry she couldn't hide. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. Instead, he planted himself firmly in place, refusing to turn away. The chill of the night cut through him, but he stayed, unshaken. She glared at him. "Go, you don't know what this feels like." His jaw tightened. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. And then, without warning, he took a cautious step closer. The distance between them shrank just slightly, but it carried the weight of a leap. "Stop!" she snapped, her body shifting dangerously near the edge. The tension stretched taut like a rope about to snap. One wrong move and she would fall. He raised his hand slowly, as if calming a wild animal, his voice softer but urgent. "I'm not leaving." His eyes didn't break from hers, steady as stone, even while fear clawed inside him. The silence grew heavy between them. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, the truth ripped from his chest before he could bury it again. "I once stood where you are now." The words stunned her. Her body froze, her mouth parted slightly in disbelief. For a moment, her fury faltered, replaced by shock. This was not what she expected. Not from him. Not from a man who looked like he had everything. Her eyes searched his face, desperate to find the lie. But all she saw was raw honesty, the kind that couldn't be faked. His walls were gone. The untouchable billionaire stood bare before her, revealing a wound no one else had ever seen. Something shifted in her. The storm inside her paused, curiosity flickering where only despair had lived. Her anger softened, not gone but shaken, as if his confession had cracked the shell she had built around her pain. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. She was born into a house that never felt full. The kitchen smelled like boiled tea and worry. The walls were thin, the winters colder, and dinner was often rice stretched with water to make it look like more. Her clothes came from donation boxes and cousins who had outgrown them. She learned early to make things last. Shoes patched with tape, pencils sharpened down to stubs. Hunger was a quiet guest who never left. It sat with her at night while she did homework under a weak bulb, listening to the neighbor's TV and trying not to think about the ache in her stomach. Her father left before she learned how to ride a bike. One day he was there, loud laugh, empty promises. Then he wasn't. No note, no explanation. Just an emptiness at the dinner table and a new kind of silence in the house. Her mother picked up extra shifts at a bakery, hands cracked from soap and flour, smile forced thin as paper. She would come home late, hair smelling like sugar and sweat, kiss her daughter's forehead and whisper, "I'm fine." But the girl could see the truth in the way her mother's shoulders sagged when she thought no one was looking. The girl loved her for being strong and hated herself for being one more mouth to feed. School became a place where hope lived. She clutched her books like treasure, wrapped in brown paper to keep them clean. In the library, she found worlds where girls like her won, where courage and hard work mattered, where a door could open to a better life. She believed with a child's fierce faith that grades could be a key. Every test she passed felt like a step away from the small gray apartment and the long lines at the clinic. At night, she would fall asleep picturing a future where she could buy her mother a warm coat and a softer pillow. But the world did not always keep its promises. A teacher who once said, "I'll help you apply for scholarships," stopped answering emails. A counselor who claimed to understand students like you forgot her name by the next semester. Friends made plans she couldn't afford, and then drifted away. She learned to smile and say she wasn't hungry when she was. She learned to nod when people told her to keep trying, even when they were the ones closing the door. Then came love, bright like sunrise after a long storm. He made her laugh in small, safe ways. He called her brave, called her beautiful even when she wore the same coat 3 winters in a row. She let herself dream again. She showed him the part of her heart that still believed in miracles. With him, she thought, "I'm finally seen." So when he needed help, she gave it. Time, money she didn't have, trust she could not afford to lose. She believed they were building a life until the day she learned he had been building something else. The other woman's lipstick on his collar. The messages on his phone. The promises he made to both of them, cheap and easy as coins tossed into a fountain. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the public humiliation. The way their friends looked at her with pity like she was a stray dog after the rain. She felt her heart crack in a quiet place no one else could hear. After that, the world seemed sharper, colder. She kept her head down at work, tried to forget. But life piled on. The company cut staff. Her name was on the list. She told herself it would be fine, that she would find another job. Weeks passed. Rent came due. The landlord's knocks grew harder. She counted coins at the table, the way her mother once had, and the numbers never reached what they needed to reach. She sold her phone for cash and used the old one with the cracked screen. She skipped meals. She kept moving because stopping felt like drowning. Friends stopped calling. Family did not answer. She told herself people were busy, that they would show up if she really needed them. When she finally asked for help, the message came back. So sorry. I wish I could. Next time. There was always a next time. There was never now. One afternoon, she ran into someone from school. He gave her a long look like he was checking a bruise and said, "You were always so bright. What happened?" She felt shame curl hot in her throat. What happened? Life. That's what happened. The kind of life that steals little pieces of you when you aren't looking. The kind that turns a hopeful girl into a tired woman who still tries and tries and tries and somehow ends up with less. She thought of her mother often then. The cracked hands, the soft lies. She pressed her palms together and whispered sorry into the dark. Sorry for not making it easier. Sorry for not being enough. Some nights she slept in her coat because the heat clicked off and didn't click back on. She lay awake listening to the pipes and the neighbors arguing, and the empty spots in her own heart talking to each other. The world kept moving. People posted photos of dinners she couldn't afford and vacations she couldn't imagine. They posted quotes about gratitude, about how everything happens for a reason. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to find a reason for all of this, but her reasons had run out. The day everything snapped, the sky looked like it had been washed too many times. Pale, thin. She had one bag left to sell, and a final notice slipped under the door. She stared at the paper until the words blurred. Something inside her went quiet. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even fear. It was a soft click, like a door closing on the last lit room. She walked. Past the bakery where her mother once worked. Past the park where she used to study under a tree. Past the store where couples bought shoes for children. The city around her was bright and busy, and she felt like a ghost moving through it. She found herself standing where the wind was strongest, where the world opened into empty air. Up there, the lights of the city tried to make a promise they could not keep. The wind tugged her forward. She thought of being 5 years old, holding her mother's hand at a crosswalk. She thought of being 15, reading by the window and pretending hunger felt holy. She thought of being 25, believing love would save her. All the ages of her gathered around her and none of them knew what to do anymore. Maybe the pain ends here, she told herself. Maybe this is the only door that still opens. She stepped closer to the edge and felt the rough grit of concrete under her shoes. Her breath came in thin, uneven pulls. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the sound of her mother's laugh, the one before life made it so quiet. It wouldn't come. The city roared below. The sky pressed down above. There was no room left in the middle. She leaned forward just enough to feel the drop waiting. A cold calm washed through her, terrible and sweet. She opened her mouth to say goodbye to no one at all. And that was when a voice, strong and sudden, cut through the night she had already chosen. He was born into privilege, but his childhood felt more like a prison than a gift. To the outside world, he was the perfect heir. The boy with sharp eyes, dressed in expensive clothes, trained to carry the family name with pride. Inside the mansion, however, warmth was a foreign word. His father never offered hugs, only harsh lectures. His worth was measured not by love, but by results. The grades he earned, the deals he would one day secure, the perfection he was expected to maintain. As a child, he longed for laughter, for softness, for the kind of love that children in storybooks received without question. Instead, his home echoed with silence and strict rules. His father's voice was cold steel, always demanding, never forgiving. Failure was not an option. Mistakes were not tolerated. And in the absence of affection, the boy learned to build walls around his heart. Walls so high that even he could no longer see inside. Then came the loss that carved him into someone unrecognizable. Whether it was his mother, the only gentle presence he had, or a sibling who shared his pain, or perhaps a first love who made him believe he was more than a name. Someone he truly cherished was ripped away. It was sudden, merciless, and permanent. That death branded him with a lesson he carried forever. Love was dangerous. Vulnerability was a weakness. Opening your heart only meant handing someone the knife to break it. Grief became his shadow, but instead of crumbling, he turned it into fuel. He vowed never to be powerless again. He worked with a ferocity that scared even those around him. Late nights became routine. Ambition became oxygen, and money became his shield. Success was not a choice, it was survival. Every deal he won, every empire he built, was a brick in the fortress he constructed around himself. Wealth was his armor. Power was his sword. Behind it all, the boy who once longed for warmth disappeared. The world soon began to admire him. They whispered his name in boardrooms, admired his strategies, feared his ruthlessness. On magazine covers, he looked untouchable. Sharp suit, sharp mind, sharp eyes. To outsiders, he was everything a man could want to be. But none of them saw the emptiness he carried. None of them saw the nights when silence wrapped around him like a shroud, reminding him of everything he had lost. Success came at a cost. He had people around him, but none who truly knew him. Friends who stayed were those who needed favors. Relationships were shallow, built on charm and wealth rather than honesty. Love slipped through his fingers like water, because he never let anyone close enough to stay. His mansion was filled with expensive things, but the rooms echoed with loneliness. At night, when the world finally went quiet, he was left with himself. That was when the ghosts came. Regret gnawed at him, whispering questions he couldn't answer. Could he have been different? Could he have chosen love instead of power? Every memory he had locked away returned in the dark. His mother's smile, his father's harsh voice, the death that shattered him. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing that no amount of money could silence the ache inside. And so, on this night, he wandered, restless, suffocated by the life he had built. He left behind the cars, the chauffeurs, the bodyguards. He walked alone through neon-lit streets like a man searching for something he couldn't name. Logic did not guide him. Something deeper, something unspoken, pulled him toward the bridge, toward the edge of despair. The irony of it all weighed on him. He had everything people dreamed of: wealth, status, respect. And yet he was as hollow as the woman standing on that ledge. Her despair was painted across her face, but his was buried inside him, locked away where no one dared to look. He saw in her the reflection of his own soul, broken, lonely, desperate for escape. When his eyes found her, it was as if fate itself had drawn the line. Two different lives, two different paths, yet the same unbearable emptiness. He, the man with everything, and she, the woman with nothing, both teetering on the edge of the same darkness. In that moment, something inside him shifted. Perhaps destiny had brought him here, not just to save her, but to be saved himself. Because as he looked at her, trembling and ready to fall, he realized the truth he had hidden for so long. No amount of money, no empire, no ruthless power could heal a broken heart. And so the stage was set. Two souls, scarred by different battles, united by the same despair. On that rooftop at that hour, their lives collided, not by chance, but by something greater, something neither of them yet understood. The night hung heavy with silence, broken only by the hum of distant traffic and the sharp whistle of wind against the steel rails. The young woman stood at the ledge, her arms trembling but her gaze fierce. Her body swayed slightly with the gusts, but her defiance kept her rooted there. dangerously close to the edge. The billionaire stood only a few steps away. His tailored suit looked out of place in the darkness, but his expression carried no trace of superiority. He made no move to retreat. Every muscle in his body was tense, every breath measured. He had faced boardrooms filled with enemies, but never a moment this fragile, where a single wrong word could cost a life. Her voice broke the silence like shattered glass. "Easy for someone like you to talk about pain," she spat, her tone soaked with bitterness. "You've lived in palaces, eaten from gold plates. What do you know about hunger? About being thrown away like trash?" Her words sliced through the air, and for the first time he flinched. She wanted him to hurt. She wanted her anger to push him back, to leave her alone. But he didn't move. His eyes locked on hers, steady and unyielding. "I know more than you think," he said quietly, the weight in his voice catching her off guard. For a moment his proud mask cracked. He let her glimpse the hollow truth behind his fortune. Money doesn't heal a broken heart. Success doesn't silence ghosts. I've built empires, but when I close my eyes, I'm still that boy, standing at a grave I never wanted to see. The edge in her glare faltered just slightly, but pain was stubborn and so was she. "Don't pretend you understand me," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to be invisible, to beg for love and be answered with silence. You can't know." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "And you don't know what it's like to have everything and still feel empty. To be surrounded by people who only want what you can give them, not who you are." The space between them quivered with anger and sorrow colliding, neither willing to surrender their truth. Their voices rose and cracked, emotions spiraling out of control until the wind itself seemed to echo their rage. Her chest heaved as her fury gave way to raw despair. Her voice wavered, breaking in the night. "Then why does it still hurt? Why does it never stop hurting?" He didn't answer at once. His eyes, shimmering with unshed tears, softened as he whispered, "Because we're human, and pain doesn't leave just because we want it to." The vulnerability in his words was startling, like a stone wall crumbling to dust. For the first time she saw not the billionaire, but a man carrying his own chains. The moment teetered on a knife's edge. She leaned forward, toes barely clinging to the ledge, as if daring fate. "Then maybe it's better to let go," she hissed. "Better than dragging this weight forever." The world seemed to stop. His heart lurched in his chest, every nerve screaming. One wrong breath and she would be gone. "Wait!" His voice trembled, louder than before, rawer than he intended. His next words spilled out like a wound torn open. "I once wanted to end it too. I stood on a roof just like this. I was ready to jump." The confession stunned her. Her body froze mid-motion. For a long heartbeat, only the sound of the rushing wind filled the space. He swallowed, his gaze pleading. "No one knows that. No one ever heard me say it. But I'm telling you, because I can see the same storm in your eyes. And I know what it feels like to think no one will ever understand." Her breath caught. She stared at him. Not the billionaire, not the untouchable man, but someone fractured like her. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Her defiance wavered. Her eyes shimmered with tears as the tension softened into something delicate, something real. The two broken worlds that had clashed only moments ago now touched gently, bound by pain they both carried. She stepped back ever so slightly from the ledge. Not a surrender, not yet. But the first fragile thread of understanding between them had been spun. The night no longer felt as silent as before. For a long moment nothing moved. The young woman stood frozen at the ledge, her breath shallow, her body trembling as though caught between two worlds. The billionaire's confession still echoed in her ears, tearing at the anger she had wrapped around herself like armor. She had wanted to believe that no one could understand her pain, that she was entirely alone. Yet his words had created small cracks in the walls she had built, and through them seeped a faint, unsettling light. Her eyes darted toward him, wary and guarded. He stood still, hands open at his sides, careful not to frighten her further. His presence carried no judgment, only a steady patience that unnerved her. She wanted to dismiss him, to shove his words away as nothing more than another empty speech. But something in his tone, raw, unpolished, unguarded, made it impossible to ignore. "I don't expect you to trust me," he said softly, the wind carrying his words like a fragile thread between them. "But I know this, your life is not over. This pain you're carrying, it can be fuel, not the end. I'm proof of it." She clenched her fists, her body tight with conflict. His voice carried conviction, the kind born not from books or privilege, but from scars. It wasn't the language of pity. It was the language of survival. Her mind betrayed her, drifting to memories she had tried to bury. She saw herself as a little girl clutching worn books, eyes bright with dreams of becoming someone who mattered. She remembered her mother's tired smile, the sacrifices that carved lines into her face, and the quiet assurances that tomorrow could be brighter if they only held on. A tear slipped down her cheek before she realized it. She brushed it away quickly, ashamed of the weakness, but the images pressed on. The girl she once was seemed to stand beside her now, whispering, reminding her that she had not always been broken. Still, despair was a relentless enemy. It clawed at her with sharp fingers, whispering that hope was a lie, that nothing ever changed. She felt herself swaying, caught between the pull of darkness and the faint tug of something that could only be called light. The war raged inside her chest, every heartbeat torn between surrender and survival. Below her, the city glowed like a river of stars, its streets alive with endless possibilities she had long since abandoned. Above her, the real stars scattered across the night sky seemed to stretch forever, vast and infinite. Between the two, the life below and the endless beyond, she stood trembling, unsure which way to fall, her toes curled against the ledge. For one terrifying instant she leaned forward, as if despair might win, but then her body faltered, drawn back by something she couldn't name. Her breath hitched, her knees shook, and slowly, painfully, she shifted her weight away from the edge. The billionaire didn't move, afraid even a single step might shatter the fragile choice forming inside her. He only watched, his chest rising and falling with ragged anticipation. And then it happened. One foot slid backward. A single step away from death. Relief poured into the space like oxygen. Her lungs burned as she gasped for air, tears streaming freely now, unashamed. Her shoulders shook with sobs as though her body was releasing years of held pain in one flood. She clutched at the railing, holding on as if for the first time in her life she was choosing to stay. The billionaire's eyes glistened, but he stayed steady, his presence grounding her. She had not been saved completely, not yet. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with shadows. But tonight, she had chosen survival, and for the first time in a long time, the night no longer felt like her enemy. The young woman's strength broke all at once. The rigid defiance that had kept her standing on the edge drained from her body, and her knees buckled. She collapsed into sobs, shaking uncontrollably, the sound raw and unrestrained. The weight of survival pressed down heavier than the thought of death ever had. Her chest ached with every gasp, as though the very act of breathing had become too much to bear. The billionaire was there before she could fall, his arm steadying her with a quiet urgency. His grip was firm, not possessive, guiding her safely away from the ledge. His hand lingered just enough to remind her she wasn't alone in this terrifying moment. He didn't speak, didn't try to offer easy words to patch wounds too deep for language. His presence was the anchor she hadn't known she needed. They lowered themselves to the cold concrete, sitting side by side beneath the vast night sky. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with something fragile, something honest, two broken souls too tired to pretend anymore. The hum of the city below seemed distant, irrelevant compared to the quiet they shared. For once, neither of them had to perform, neither had to wear a mask. Her voice came at last, low and trembling, as if it had taken every ounce of her strength to push the words out. "Thank you," she whispered, shame tightening her throat. The admission felt alien, as though she didn't deserve to be saved, as though gratitude was something owed to people stronger than her. He turned his head slightly, his expression soft but unwavering. "You don't owe me thanks," he said gently. "You owe yourself another chance." His words held no trace of wealth, no mention of the power that defined his life. For the first time, he offered something far more rare, himself. Not as a billionaire, but as a man willing to stand beside her, offering guidance if she wanted it, friendship if she needed it, and constancy no one had ever given her before. She looked at him through tear-blurred eyes, searching for deceit, for the catch that always came when promises were made. But she found none, His honesty disarmed her, left her unsure of how to respond. She clutched her arms around herself, realizing that the step she had taken back from the ledge was not just a retreat from death. It was a victory, however small. Survival was its own kind of courage, and for the first time in years, she felt the faintest flicker of possibility stir in her chest. The night air wrapped around them, cool and quiet, carrying away the worst of her fear. She realized she was not as abandoned as she thought. This stranger, with all his scars hidden beneath wealth, had stood with her in the darkest moment and refused to let her fall. Two broken lives had met on the edge of despair, and though their futures remained uncertain, they now carried something new. Not redemption yet, not healing, but the fragile, undeniable truth that they were no longer entirely alone. The rooftop was still, the night carrying the weight of what had almost been lost. For the first time, the young woman felt the fragile truth of how easily life could slip away. One step, one breath, and it might have ended. The thought shook her to her core, yet it also left her trembling with a strange kind of gratitude. Survival, she realized, wasn't weakness. It was the first step toward healing, even if the road ahead was uncertain. Her tears slowed, her breathing steadied. She looked at her trembling hands, once clenched in surrender, now open and alive. The scars that covered her heart, both visible and hidden, no longer seemed like proof of failure. Instead, they were reminders of endurance, marks of someone who had been hurt, yes, but someone who was still here. She could not change the past, but she could choose what came next. Beside her, the billionaire sat in silence, but his presence spoke volumes. For years, he had built walls of gold and stone around himself, burying compassion beneath ambition. Tonight, in saving her, he felt something awaken, an old truth he had nearly forgotten. Helping her had given him a sense of meaning he could never buy, a kind of redemption that no empire could offer. Slowly, they both rose from the cold ground, no longer strangers bound only by despair, but two lives altered by fate. They still carried their scars, but in this moment, those scars no longer felt like chains. Instead, they felt like bridges, silent proof of survival and resilience. As they walked away from the ledge, the night air seemed lighter, carrying a fragile promise of tomorrow. And in that silence, one truth remained, etched into both their hearts. That night, two broken hearts saved each other.